The year was 2011. A wave of pro-democracy demonstrations ignited by the Arab Spring swept across the Middle East and North Africa. In Syria, a nation ruled by the iron fist of the Assad regime for over 4 decades, people dared to dream of freedom. They yearned for basic rights, for dignity, for a voice in their own governance. What began as peaceful protests, echoing the calls for change reverberating across the region, was met with brutal force by President Bashar al-Assad's government. The regime, fearing for its grip on power, unleashed a wave of violence upon its own citizens. This marked the beginning of a long and bloody conflict that would engulf Syria for over a decade. The country descended into a maelstrom of violence, a vortex of suffering that would claim the lives of hundreds of thousands and displace millions more. The Syrian civil war, as it came to be known, was not merely a domestic affair. It quickly morphed into a complex geopolitical chessboard, with regional and global powers drawn into the fray, each pursuing their own agendas amidst the chaos. To understand the Syrian conflict, one must first delve into the intricate social fabric of this ancient land. Syria, a land steeped in history, boasts a rich tapestry of cultures, ethnicities, and religions. Arabs constitute the majority, but within this larger group exist a myriad of sub-identities, each with its own distinct cultural and linguistic nuances. Alongside them live Kurds, a significant minority concentrated primarily in the north, who have long yearned for greater autonomy and recognition. Adding to this intricate mosaic are Turkmen, Armenians, Circassians, and other groups, each contributing to the vibrant mosaic of Syrian society. This ethnic diversity is further interwoven with religious pluralism. While the majority of Syrians are Muslims, the nation is home to a significant Christian population, along with smaller communities of Druze and other faiths. This complex interplay of identities, far from fostering unity, has often been exploited to sow discord and fuel conflict. Central to the Syrian tragedy is the role of the Alawites, a minority sect of Shia Islam. The Assad family, hailing from this community, had held the reins of power since 1970, ruling with an iron fist and concentrating power within their inner circle. This Alawite dominance, despite being a numerical minority, bred resentment among segments of the Sunni majority, who felt marginalized and politically excluded. It created a dangerous fault line within Syrian society, a simmering tension that the events of 2011 would ignite. The regime, in its paranoia, often played the sectarian card, portraying itself as the protector of minorities against a perceived Sunni extremist threat. This narrative, while effective in consolidating support among some, further alienated others, exacerbating existing divisions and fueling the flames of sectarian strife. The Syrian conflict, though often framed as a simple binary between a brutal regime and its oppressed people, is a far more nuanced tragedy. It is a story of power dynamics, of identity politics, of external meddling, and of a people's yearning for a better future. In the early days of the uprising, hope hung heavy in the air. Inspired by the successes of their counterparts in Tunisia and Egypt, Syrian protesters, many of them young and tech-savvy, took to the streets demanding change. Their chants were not calls for revolution, at least not initially. They sought reform, an end to corruption, the establishment of basic freedoms. One slogan, however, resonated with particular poignancy. "Your turn, doctor," a reference to Bashar al-Assad's training as an ophthalmologist, a stark reminder that even those trained to heal can inflict pain. The regime's response was swift and brutal. Peaceful demonstrations were met with live ammunition, arbitrary arrests, and systematic torture. The death of a young boy, Hamza al-Khatib, in the custody of security forces, his body bearing signs of horrific abuse, became a rallying cry for the opposition. As the body count rose, so too did the anger. What began as a non-violent movement for change gradually morphed into an armed insurgency. Defectors from the Syrian army, disgusted by the regime's atrocities, joined the ranks of the opposition, forming the Free Syrian Army. Section 5, The World Takes Sides, a Proxy Playground. The Syrian conflict tragically became a microcosm of larger geopolitical rivalries. As the situation escalated, regional and global powers were drawn into the fray, each backing different factions and pursuing their own strategic interests. Russia, a long-standing ally of the Assad regime, provided military support, including air power, which proved instrumental in turning the tide of the war in favor of the government. Iran, another key backer of Assad, deployed its own forces, including the powerful Quds Force, a branch of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. On the other side of the equation, the United States, along with several European and Arab countries, provided varying degrees of support to the Syrian opposition, including the Free Syrian Army. However, this assistance was often fragmented and inconsistent, lacking the decisiveness of the Russian and Iranian interventions. Adding another layer of complexity to the conflict was the emergence of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, a brutal extremist group that exploited the chaos to seize control of large swaths of territory in Syria and neighboring Iraq. Section 6. A humanitarian catastrophe, displacement, and despair. The human cost of the Syrian conflict has been nothing short of catastrophic. By 2022, the United Nations estimated that over 6.7 million Syrians had fled their homeland, seeking refuge in neighboring countries like Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, straining resources and inflaming regional tensions. Inside Syria, the situation was even more dire. Millions more were internally displaced, their lives upended, their homes destroyed, their futures uncertain. The war had decimated infrastructure, crippled the economy, and shattered the social fabric. The numbers, staggering as they are, fail to capture the true extent of the suffering. Behind each statistic lies a human story, a tale of loss, displacement, and despair. Families torn apart, children robbed of their childhoods, a generation scarred by the horrors of war. One such story is that of Amina, a young Syrian woman who fled her home in Aleppo with her 2 young children after a barrel bomb attack destroyed their neighborhood. "We left with nothing but the clothes on our backs," she recounted, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know if we'll ever be able to go back." Section 7. The walls close in, the fall of the Assad regime. Despite the immense human cost and international condemnation, the Assad regime, propped up by its foreign backers, seemed invincible for years. However, the tide began to turn in late 2024. A coalition of Syrian opposition groups, sensing an opportunity, launched a series of coordinated offensives, capitalizing on the regime's overstretched forces and waning morale. The fighting was fierce, but the rebels, fueled by years of resentment and a burning desire for freedom, fought with unwavering determination. Within days, the regime's defenses crumbled. City after city fell to the advancing opposition forces. The capital, Damascus, long considered an impenetrable fortress, was soon surrounded. On December 8, 2024, after 11 days of intense fighting, Bashar al-Assad, realizing the futility of resistance, fled Damascus for Moscow, seeking refuge in the embrace of his Russian patrons. The fall of the Assad regime, after more than a decade of brutal rule, sent shockwaves across the region and beyond. For many Syrians, it was a moment of jubilation, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a people who had endured unimaginable suffering. Section 8. A New Dawn or False Hope. The Transitional Government. In the aftermath of Assad's downfall, the Syrian Salvation Government, a coalition of opposition groups, moved swiftly to establish a transitional government in Damascus. Mohammed al-Bashir, a respected figure within the opposition, was appointed prime minister, tasked with the daunting challenge of rebuilding a shattered nation. Ahmed al-Sharaa, the leader of the Syrian Salvation Government and emir of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, became the de facto leader of Syria. The international community, caught off guard by the swift collapse of the Assad regime, reacted with cautious optimism. However, the situation on the ground remained precarious. Israel, seizing on the power vacuum, launched an invasion of southern Syria, ostensibly to prevent the establishment of Iranian bases near its border. This move further destabilized the region and raised fears of a wider conflict. Meanwhile, the United States, despite the change in government, maintained its Caesar Act sanctions on Syria, hindering reconstruction efforts and casting a long shadow over the country's future. Section 9. The Long Road Ahead, Rebuilding a Shattered Nation. The fall of the Assad regime, while a watershed moment in the Syrian tragedy, is but a first step on the long and arduous road to peace and reconciliation. The country lies in ruins, its economy in tatters, its social fabric shredded by years of war. Millions remain displaced, both within Syria and beyond its borders. The scars of conflict run deep, and the wounds of division will take time to heal. The new government faces a myriad of challenges, from providing basic services to its war-torn population to disarming militias and fostering national unity. The international community has a moral obligation to assist Syria in its hour of need. Humanitarian aid must be provided generously and unconditionally. Reconstruction efforts need to be supported, with a focus on inclusivity and sustainability. Justice for the victims of war crimes and crimes against humanity must be pursued, regardless of political considerations. The Syrian people, who have endured so much, deserve a chance to rebuild their lives and their country. The international community must not fail them.
To the White House, where President Biden is speaking as crowds in Syria celebrate an advance from opposition forces that put an end to the al-Assad family's half-century rule. Let's listen in.
Flee the country. We're not sure where he is, but there's word that he's in Moscow. At long last, the Assad regime has fallen. This regime brutalized and tortured and killed literally hundreds of thousands of innocent Syrians. The fall of the regime is a fundamental act of justice. It's a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria to build a better future for their proud country. It's also a moment of risk and uncertainty. As we all turn to the question of what comes next, the United States and Syria to help them seize an opportunity to manage the risks. You know, for years, the main backers of Assad have been Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia. But over the last week, their support collapsed, all three of them, because all three of them are far weaker today than they were when I took office. And let's remember why. After Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, when much of the world responded with horror, Iran and its proxies chose to launch a multi-front war against Israel. That was a historic mistake on Iran's part. Today, Iran's main territorial proxy, Hezbollah, is also on its back. Only 12 days ago, I spoke from the Rose Garden about the ceasefire deal in Lebanon, a deal that was only possible because Hezbollah has been badly degraded. Meanwhile, Hamas has been badly degraded as well. Iran's own military capabilities have been weakened. Iran tried 2 times to attack Israel, and the United States and built a coalition of countries to directly defend Israel and help defeat those attacks. All this made possible for Iran and Hezbollah to continue to prop up, impossible, I should say, for them to prop up the Assad regime. Additionally, Russia's support for Assad also failed. And that's because Ukraine, backed by our American allies, has put up a wall of resistance against the invading Russian forces, inflicting massive damage on the Russian forces. And that has left Russia unable to protect its main ally in the Middle East. Excuse my cold. The upshot for all this is, for the first time ever, neither Russia, nor Iran, nor Hezbollah could defend this abhorrent regime in Syria. And this is a direct result of the blows that Ukraine, Israel, have delivered upon their own self-defense with unflagging support of the United States. You know, over the past 4 years, my administration pursued a clear and principled policy towards Syria. First, we made clear from the start sanctions on Assad would remain in place unless he engaged seriously in a political process to end the civil war, as outlined by the UN Security Council resolution passed in 2015. But Assad refused, so we carried out a comprehensive sanction program against him and all those responsible for atrocities against the Syrian people. Second, we maintained our military presence in Syria, our counter-ISIS, to counter the support of local partners as well on the ground, their partners, never ceding an inch of territory, taking out leaders of ISIS, ensuring that ISIS can never establish a safe haven there again. Third, we've supported Israel's freedom of action against Iranian networks in Syria and against actors aligned with Iran who transported lethal aid to Lebanon. And when necessary, ordered the use of military force against Iranian networks to protect U.S. forces. Our approach has shifted the balance of power in the Middle East. Through this combination of support for our partners, sanctions, diplomacy, and targeted military force when necessary, we now see new opportunities opening up for the people of Syria and for the entire region.